Greetings, YouTube. There's something I've noticed recently. It's not new, but there's a new wave of it at the moment. And that's the concept of authenticity in medieval setting role-playing games. Particularly in role-playing games that are supposed to be set in actual history here on Earth. So, from the end of the Roman era up through the Renaissance. To one degree or another, that's the Middle Ages, essentially. If you're not going to count, you can count the Dark Ages as the early Middle Ages or not. That's up to you. And one of the things that a number of these games, one of the games I'm thinking of, I think it was called The Lion and Dragon. I think it's what it's called, is the authentic social gender roles. Now, if your setting is set in actual history, it's non-magical, it's just set in France or England or the Germanic states, whatever, and you're just playing new people in that era, trying to carve something out of the world to make your characters comfortable, or you're going to want to go fight the Crusades or what have you, then I don't have as much a problem with that as when I do when people wrap themselves around the idea of authentic settings that include magic. Now, as I've said here before on my channel and on forums, as soon as you add magic into it, as soon as the first spell functions, history as we know it ends. That starts in the Middle Ages, then the second it happens, that's where that history diverges from ours, and nothing is ever the same. If it happens in the Stone Age, then our history has never existed, and the language I am speaking right now would never have developed. It would not be our world except in gross geographic structure. That's it. The continents would be the same. The islands would be the same. Everything else would be different. And if you're trying to have authentic medieval settings with magic, then you can't really preserve the traditional social structures and gender roles. It just won't work. Because in actual history and in authentic games, women had no power. Now, I know people are going to argue, well, there were noble women. An incredibly small number of women did, in fact, have some limited forms of power, but in a very curtailed manner, and they were always going to be controlled by men of that same class or higher. The number of women that had unrestrained power in the world could be counted on one hand, and I wouldn't need all my fingers. The reality is that your average person, which is where most adventurers come from, most adventurers do not come from the nobility or the royalty. Your average person, a woman in that setting, had no authority. She could very likely not own land. She was bartered like cattle into a marriage. She was doomed to become a broodmare for someone else's children. The best she could have as far as freedom was going was probably being a midwife, which is probably the freest I could think of any woman in a setting of normal social structures. And even in groups that were mobile, like the Roma and such as that, they still had crushingly oppressive gender roles for women. So why am I bringing this up? Other than the fact that you can't have those roles in a world of magic, because now the women have the power individually as persons, and they can break those gender roles by being dangerous. So those gender roles are gone. You have to have gender equality in a magic setting. They will wrest it from the structure around them. But one of the things I've heard repeatedly in the recent past, in the last few months, is defenses of traditional gender roles in these authentic settings that put oppressive roles on women. That it's good role-playing. That women appreciate the challenge, always said by white dudes. It's funny how white dudes will say how an oppressed group enjoys being oppressed. Because, it gives the setting an authentic flair. That right there is bullshit. And I heard someone recently say something like that. He goes by the name of RPG Pundit on the site RPG Site. It's a forum. And not only did he come out and defend the practice of misogynistic gender roles for women in his setting that he wrote, but then when someone on another board said, you can accept magic in the world, but somehow gender equality is beyond the pale. And he said, well, at first blush, that sounds like it makes sense. Because it does! And then he donned his virtual digital fedora and started to spew misogyny at the world, defending again the crushing roles that women had in real life and how they improved the role-playing setting, which is a big to women who want to play that game. And if you're going to say, well, we can make exceptions for that one person, you make enough exceptions, you've changed the gender role structure. Now, I didn't comment on either of the threads that Pundit put up on his board. What I wanted to say was, you could have just said you don't understand intersectional feminism. You didn't have to write an entire role-playing game to prove it. But I know what I would have gotten for backlash. And over the last year or so, I've been blocking people on that site, on putting them on my ignore list again and again and again. It got to some points where I would be looking at a thread and half the posts would be invisible to me because the people making them were misogynists on my ignore list. And then last week, technically last week, I finally made the decision I had to walk away from them. I've been there for over a decade. I put in a whole lot of effort in that site. Started threads, contributed to threads. I was a senior member, and I walked away. I tried to delete all my subscriptions, and I failed because the system wouldn't let me. And I know some of the people from that site have watched my videos. In fact, one guy, going by the name of Sean Driscoll, actually posted a thread topic on the board making fun of me, calling me insane, because I dared to question gender pronouns in a science fiction setting. Thankfully, one of the mods shut that thing down in a heartbeat. And I appreciated that. And if he's here today, thank you. And I'm going to miss the good people from that site. But I've logged out. I've deleted the link. And when the last update I got from a thread came into my mailbox, I put the email address into my trash folder. So I'll never see a post from them again. I'm done. I cannot be party to a site that is so rife with white boy misogynists. I can't remember the last time a woman posted on that board. I can't imagine they'd ever want to. Why would they? And I'm going to miss it. I visited that site every other day or so. I enjoyed some of the content, but I can't be party to it anymore. If I'm going to be progressive, then I got to be progressive. And I can't rub shoulders with hardcore misogynists so deep in their male privilege they don't even know they're being misogynistic. People that unironically use the phrase SJW on a regular basis. See progressive politics as a negative. Repeatedly use the phrase politically correct, which is another way of saying I don't want to be concerned about somebody else. So, sorry about this rant. I'm sad. And I'm upset. And I want games to reflect a welcoming, inclusive environment. And some of them don't. And some of them don't do it intentionally. and that's ugly.